Greetings. Today's quick tip, I want to talk about my favorite way and what I think is the best way to learn a fiddle tune. This way is part of what I would consider the long game of practice. It does not have immediate effects. For example, if you need to learn a fiddle tune for tomorrow and you've never done this before, it's probably not the best way to do it because it relies on developing long-term skills that you can't acquire overnight. I would boil down this method to 3 steps. Step 1 is listening to the fiddle tune, more specifically the exact recording of the fiddle tune that you want to learn from, many times repeatedly with intention and attention. Step 2 is to learn to reproduce this fiddle tune exactly with your voice. Finally, step 3 is to transfer it to your instrument. In this quick tip video, I want to talk more specifically about the practical methods to do these 3 steps. One prerequisite to this method is you should be able to produce a note on your instrument, on your guitar for example, be able to hear it in your head and then reproduce it exactly with your voice without, for example, scooping into the note. Step 1. Listening intently to a recording of the specific version of the fiddle tune you want to do. You've already found the fiddle tune that you want to learn. You've listened to a few different versions and you've found your favorite version of this fiddle tune that you really want to internalize and learn. Now you want to listen intently and with attention to this tune. So in the same way that we have regimented scale practices, regimented ways of learning chords, learning words, and learning songs, we can treat our listening experience in the same regimented way. You sit down for 10 minutes in a quiet space with no other distractions, and you really just listen to the tune. You don't try to analyze it. You don't try to decipher what things sound like what. You really just listen to the tune as the tune multiple times in that 10-minute fragment of time. Without describing this too much, I think it's just an interesting thing to do for your own experience and see what happens. Usually I start to space out within 30 seconds or less. Start to think about the other needs of the day that I need to tend to. Try and see if you can bring your attention back to the recording. A lot of times when I'm doing this, and I kind of need a measure of if I'm paying attention to the recording, if I can feel tensions in my body, that usually means I'm not totally there with the recording. So try to just stay relaxed and just listen to the recording and enjoy it. This could be the practice for the next 2 or 3 days. This may seem kind of counterintuitive and weird. Wait, I thought I was going to learn the tune. I have to play this tune with Joe on Friday and it's Monday. This method is not for that. This is really about the long game of practice and making your music intake and eventually outtake a much more deep and intentional experience. After a few days of having listened really intently, you might begin to put in a little bit of intuitive analysis into it. You'll probably start noticing already, without even having noted it down, that certain fragments of the tune repeat. Oh, they're coming back to this one section, but the fiddler plays it slightly differently this time around. By having listened to it repeatedly with intention, you start to kind of know this on a deeper level than if, for example, I just gave you a worksheet that told you this tune's form is A, B, A, C, A prime. That's almost like the A with a little modification. What's cool about this is your own way of taking in the music just by virtue of having sat down and worked with the fiddle tune, listening intently. You'll develop your own way of making these associations. The next step is to sing the tune. You've already internalized it on a certain level. Now you want to start reproducing it with your body, in this case, with your voice. Go through and just try and see if you can lightly sing along with the recording, catching the shapes, catching where the phrases start and where they end, catching little accents. Don't worry so much about hitting the pitch perfectly right now. So you might just start out just like this. So with your voice, you're just loosely demarcating different sections and sort of confirming to yourself that you understand where things start and end. Now you've got a really developing sense of the tune in a very intuitive way. You've listened to the tune a lot. You're starting to mimic its little phrases with your voice. Now we can go in and get in with a little more detail, and we could start really breaking it down. I want to see if I can reproduce small chunks of this melody with my voice very exactly. You'll almost always start with the first phrase. Sometimes though, for some reason, the first phrase might be really difficult, and you might want to start with the phrase that catches your ear a little more. That's okay too, and then you work backwards and forwards from there. So I'd go back to the beginning and see if I can reproduce the first 4 to 12 notes, depending on how much I can actually take in at once. Da be da da ba be o. Can I reproduce that without the recording? I've done this before with this tune, so the answer is yes. But at first maybe you'll run into certain hiccups. Oh, I thought I really understood how that first phrase was, but when I try to reproduce it with my voice without the recording hitting the notes exactly, there's a question when I hit that part of the melody. Good. That question is very illuminating, because then when you go back and listen again, your intention and attention is that much more focused on that exact moment that you had a question about. This might be just those 10 minutes of that day, that first phrase. As I say this method, it almost seems too obvious. Duh. You hear something and then you try to reproduce it. But I can't emphasize enough how important the practice and experience of really doing this with total attention is so valuable. The level to which you'll know this fiddle tune, the way it'll be stored into your long-term memory, is so much deeper than if you just learn it off a tab. And then you really just methodically go through the tune, phrase by phrase, again, 4 to 12 notes. Now, if this is your first time doing it and we're dealing with fiddle tunes, eighth notes that are passing by really fast, yes, it's okay to slow it down. Go onto YouTube, use the settings, slow it way down. But even doing the slowing down after you've really listened many times at full speed, taking in the recording for what it is, it'll be a much different experience than if you just try to cram the tune and slow it down from the first or second time you ever listen to it to try to internalize it. The next step of this would be to see if you can silently recall the tune. At this point, you've already tried to sing it over the course of many days. You've already done the full practice of going through the whole tune, learning it phrase by phrase, and seeing if you can stitch it together with just your voice. Maybe you'll wake up one day after having done this over many days and you'll say, can I just recall that first melody without even singing it in my head? Can I imagine that recording playing in my head? If the answer is no, that's okay. Maybe you just go to the recording and you just hear that first note, and that'll trigger the memory to come back. Once again though, you want to be in a quiet space. Can you hear the recording in your head? Can you hear your voice reproducing that recording? My practice routine might be sitting there for 1 minute and seeing if I could really recall, even if it's slowed down, the whole tune going all the way through just in my head. I find this actually to be really tiring and exhausting because you have to put so much focus and concentration. So it's okay to not do this for a very long time. It's good to have a teacher or some sort of mentor or an external source to kind of check you as you're going along too, because especially if you've never done this before, it's easy sometimes to gloss over certain subtleties that you didn't think were important at first. If you don't have a teacher or a mentor to do it, you can try by recording yourself doing it and saying, well, listening back to your voice, did I really get that note that connected the A part to the B part, or the first phrase of the A part to the second phrase of the A part? And after this, which might be 2 or 3 weeks worth of work, or maybe 1 week of work, it really depends on your time and where you're at musically, only then do I pick up my guitar and see if I can reproduce it with my fingers. The act of reproducing it with my fingers is going to be just as slow and methodical as it was to reproduce it with my voice. I'll start with the first note. And using my voice now as the guidance, not the recording, I lightly sing and try and see if I can find the notes. Then all of a sudden you start transferring that aural memory into your fingers, into your muscle memory. So you really start developing this intimate connection between your ear and what your fingers are doing. Good, I happen to know it's a G. Now I would lightly sing and play along. And I'll just work through note by note, slowly, keeping all my muscles relaxed. That might be it. I just want to master that from my voice to the fingers. Can I hear my voice and the guitar at the same time? These are the kind of little questions you might be asking yourself as you're doing it. As you start bringing the guitar in too, a lot of people, they start relying on muscle patterns. You want to make sure that the guiding force is your ear and your voice that you've already spent so much time cultivating with this specific recording and tune. Again, this is part of the long game. This is not how you cram a tune for the next gig that you have to do tomorrow. There's nothing really wow about this process, except maybe for yourself as you discover how you internalize melodies and really how you commit things to long-term memory, not just that short-term memory, which we all know goes by so fast. How many things have we learned that just have disappeared into the ether? Now imagine if over the course of the year you did this 5 or 6 times. There's no doubt in my mind that as you listen to music while you're doing this kind of process, your experience will be so much deeper. You'll start hearing things without your instrument that you never thought you could hear before. Thanks so much for being a patron. I'd love to do an ear training workshop in the near future, so stay tuned for that, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.